Hey everyone, so Xinyan Kuai or Happy New Year in Chinese. At least in this part of the world, it is now 2019. It has been for a few hours. For my viewers in the Americas, in Europe, in Africa, it's still 2018. Not sure where exactly it would be midnight about now. I guess somewhere around Central Asia. Anyway, 2019. To all my viewers, I sincerely wish you the best for the year ahead. Um, and the video I'm going to talk about here, or the subject I'm going to talk about, is semi-related to that because it's about Ghostbusters 2, the comedy horror, for want of a better term, feature released in 1989. Now, I've just watched an interesting video by a guy called Minty, who's an Australian kind of YouTube film critic. I've seen a few of his videos, and I think he has some interesting content. He's clearly a big film enthusiast, as am I. And he's making a case for why Ghostbusters 2 is actually quite a good movie. He contends it's not as good as the original. Now, I'm going to say something controversial. I believe it's better. And I know this is almost blasphemy because there's this idea in the film world that sequels are never better than the original. Well, there is one example that most people would probably agree with: Adam's Family Values. Most people would say that is better than Adam's Family 1991, Adam's Family Values 1993, I believe. So, I'm going to make a case as to why I believe Ghostbusters 2 was better than Ghostbusters. But before I do, don't get me wrong. I think Ghostbusters was an entertaining film. It was good at what it done. It brought the comic books onto the big screen. I believe the comic books came before. I'm not 100% sure about that, but it was an entertaining film. The whole thing about the whole thing about I've just forgotten. I mean that from a personal point of view is why I just don't hold it on the same level now. I should emphasize this is very personal. It's purely my opinions, and you may well have a very good case for disagreeing. But I'm going to explain why. For me, the second film is just more memorable. Maybe it's because I've seen it more. I don't know. When I think of the first film, what do I think of? I think of the big marshmallow man. I think of Dana being possessed, which was clearly a bit of a parody of The Exorcist. It had some entertaining moments. And of course, it introduced the Ghostbusters, which is very important. But I do think there's this sort of convention in the world of film that because the original film introduces something, it therefore must be better. I don't think that necessarily should be a solid rule. I think a sequel can sometimes, if it is more entertaining, it can be more entertaining. It can build on the first film. There's this idea sequels are never better. I don't believe that's the case. Now, Ghostbusters 2, I think it has a lot of memorable moments. Firstly, the villain, Vigo La Carpathian, is very memorable. I mean, my goodness, a painting, a Renaissance painting coming alive, a 16th century European tyrant who had to be, you know, go through all sorts of ordeals before he actually died. Um, the museum curator getting possessed. Um, that backstory in itself was, in my opinion, better than the first film. Genuinely creepy. I mean, the thing about Ghostbusters 2, it's obviously a comedy and there's funny moments, but there are some pretty creepy moments when you consider that, if you're a child watching this. I mean, there's a lot of memorable moments. There's a courtroom scene. The Scaleri brothers, I sentence those guys. When they have to kind of blackmail the skeptical judge. The whole subway scene. These lines have been abandoned for 50 years. The Titanic sequence. I mean, maybe it's just how I've always been interested in the Titanic. Although there was a slight error, they showed a big gash in the side, whereas we know now that it was more likely to be a, a split rather than a big gash. But that's splitting hairs. That sequence was creepy, and then it had the comedic element. Well, better late than never by Cheech Martin. And the whole Statue of Liberty thing. I just think that it's a very memorable film, and I thought the sound score for that, Higher and Higher, went really well with that. All in all, I just think it's a very memorable film. I think it's got more memorable scenes than the first film. I think it's more creative than the first film, and I think aside from the fact that the first film introduced the Ghostbusters, which of course is very important, I mean, you can't have the second film without the first. But I do think the second film was probably more creative. That's my take on it. So what's the connection with New Year's? Well, of course, the whole Statue of Liberty thing was taking place on New Year's Eve, 1989, very turbulent year, 1989, 1990. So almost every New Year's, I always think of that sequence because it's very New Year's-ish. You know, they've got Auld Lang Syne, they've got the whole thing, and I love the scene at the end. Spoiler here, where the four Ghostbusters are kind of transformed into Renaissance figures. I think it's one of the fettuccinis. It's such a funny, creative, wacky film. I'd have to say it's probably one of my favorite films, if not my favorite film in that genre. Um, and I've seen it many, many times. The first film I haven't seen that much. So maybe I'm prejudiced for that reason. Maybe I've got bias against the first film because I simply haven't seen it as much. Of course, there are originals that are a lot better than remakes. I'm not going to mention the 2016 remake. I think it was a bit better than people made it out to be, but it is different than the first two films, that's true. Um, what else can I say? Yeah, I've just come back from Zhengzhou in Hunan province. Zhengzhou is an ancient city. It's said to be the birthplace of the Yellow Emperor. So one would think I would be very tired by now, but I'm not. I'm actually quite energetic. Um, New Year's Eve has been quiet here. The Chinese don't really celebrate December the 31st very much. They acknowledge it, and they had a sort of cutout of a little baby deity on the door of this building, which is kind of a symbol for the Chinese New Year. Um, I mean the New Year in the Chinese sense, not the Chinese New Year, which is a much bigger thing, the Spring Festival. But anyway, that's it. If you agree with me, feel free to say so, and if you disagree, of course, I respect your opinion. But I know it's a little bit rebellious because I just don't think it should be such an exact thing that, oh, because it's a sequel, it's not as good. Because the original was the original, it must be better. For me, both films are good, but I just think Ghostbusters 2 stands out more. I think it's got a better villain. I think it's more. I mean, as Minty, this reviewer guy, I'm sorry, I don't know his real name, as he said, the villain in the first one doesn't really make much of an impact until the end anyway. So um, I know it begins with Z. I've totally blanked from the villain's name. But anyway, yeah, entertaining film. But it's strange, you know, Bill Murray hated it. It's a bit like Sylvester Stallone hating Rocky Five. Rocky Five is a much better film than it gets credit for. But anyway, I'll go off on a tangent. So happy New Year. Best wishes for 2019.